Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source, Comic Boom collaboration. We're back with the 12 Days of the Comic Source. I mean 12 Days of Spawnmas. Hope you joined us yesterday when Rocky and I were joined by Jake, our guest co-host here, to talk Spawn in anticipation of 2022 and the insanity in my head that has decided that we're going to cover all the Spawn issues. We're going to do an issue of Spawn every day, starting January 1st with issue number 13. But wait, what about the first 12 issues, you say? Well, that's what the 12 Days of Spawnmas are all about. So we went deep dive into Spawn. We talked about who Spawn is to us, kind of our impressions, how he got his start with McFarlane and Image Comics, and we covered the first issue. So if you're curious what we're doing, you want more detail, you want more thoughts about kind of the nitty gritty and sort of the behind the scenes stuff, go check out the episode from yesterday. It's not too long. I promise. It's not, reaching the epic lengths of Rocky and my weekly DC spotlights that go on for hours. And this one will be even a little shorter because all we're going to do in this episode is just talk about issue number 2. But one thing that came out of our coverage on issue 1 for the first day of Spawnmas was really how much this comic holds up, and maybe it was even better than we gave it credit for back in the day, because Rocky and I both were buying the Spawn, not to date ourselves, but we both were buying Spawn right off the rack and really enjoying it. So we're going to dive into issue 2 for a second, or in a second, I should say. But before we do that, anything you want to throw in, Rocky, or overall thoughts about issue 2, or anything you want to add before we dive into the issue?
Well, just about issue 1 and about issue 2, I never gave enough love to Sam and Twitch. Sam and Twitch, that detective team, they ended up with their own very successful comic book series, which is, they actually, I think, had an impact on the detective genre in comic books, Sam and Twitch. And they were funny. There's humor in Spawn, issue 1. And in issue 2 here with the Violator, as we will know as we get into it. So this was... I know that you focus quite a bit when we talked about the first issue, Jason. I know Jake alluded to it too, is that the art of Todd McFarlan. But I think that the writing is maybe getting a little bit of short thrift because it's so overwhelmed by McFarlane's great pencils. But we'll get into it here. But I think that this is entertaining. This isn't just drama. It might deal with Hellspawn, but but there's some humor to be had and some enjoyment to be had, and just funny moments as well.
Yeah, I will say in terms of Sam and Twitch, they did show up in the HBO animated series. They were in the live action film, although they weren't referred to as Sam and Twitch, but they do show up at the end and they arrest Jason Wynn, and then they were in the video game. There's also been talk about a BBC America show written and directed, I think, by Kevin Smith, if I remember that right. A Sam and Twitch police procedural, which, man, I would totally watch. I would totally watch that. And then, of course, as we mentioned in the first issue, the Jamie Foxx Spawn movie from Todd McFarlane, that Todd McFarlane's not only executive producing, like McFarlane executive produced the '97 film. Todd McFarlane's directing this new or reboot of reboot film for Spawn. Jeremy Renner is we know his role is Twitch. We haven't heard who's playing Spawn yet, so that should be fun. But yeah, I'm glad you brought Sam and Twitch up because you're right. They were influential, and you've seen other writers over the last couple of decades borrow that sort of straight smart detective and sort of oblivious, gruff, but in his own way brilliant detective. That model's been used a lot. So, and I am curious. Like, I remember hearing about Kevin Smith being attached to that BBC show. You wonder. I mean, he might not be such a bad guy to play Sam himself. Then immediately your brain goes, well, so then Jason Mewes is Twitch. It's the whole Jay and Silent Bob.
Yeah.
That might not really work, right? Because if you're trying to watch the show, you would see Jay and Silent Bob on the screen rather than seeing Sam and Twitch. You might need other actors who aren't so tied to specific roles, or maybe just get unknowns where you're not bringing any preconceptions to the roles. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and dive into issue number 2. So this features the first appearance of a very important character, and he's right there on the first page. It's the Violator, who is sort of, I don't know, like in the early issues, sort of a stepbrother to Spawn in a way. You know, he's created by the same evil entity. He's supposed to be keeping an eye on Spawn, just like Spawn. He's immortal. They don't get along, just like siblings sometimes do. But what's interesting is when we're first introduced, and he comes across as this sort of overweight dad joke telling character, and you don't at all necessarily assume that he's going to be this completely evil, skinny, monstrous, demonic form. He does come across as a little crazy and maybe a little depraved as he's talking to this cat and talking about killing people and ripping hearts out and whatnot. But you don't really expect what comes later. And then in terms of Spawn, we start to, again, narrated by Al Simmons himself, and he's talking about how the memories are coming back. He remembers that he's come back for his wife. He's not sure exactly what's happened or who he was as a person, but he knows he's here for his wife. He knows 1 second he was floating in limbo, then bang, he's alive. He knows he's given up his soul, and he knows somebody has given him this power but taken his memories, and he's obviously not very happy with that person, and he wonders why he keeps being drawn to this one particular church. I sort of think it's because it gives McFarlane a chance to draw a very gothic image, like Jake was saying in reference to the first issue, that McFarlane was very much seemed like he was drawing anyway on some inspiration from Frank Miller's Dark Knight. And we then, as the story goes on, we see this completely evil, demonic, insect-like monster that's literally ripping the hearts out of Mafia. And at this point, we don't realize, okay, this is the same person or same character or same monster, whatever you want to call it, as the Violator we saw in the first couple issues, because he doesn't look anything like him, right? That guy looked like a clown, looked like a buffoon. This is some insect-like, really demonic-looking creature, which I remember back in the day not really thinking looked that scary, from the perspective of, whatever I can't even remember how old I was back then, 17, 18-year-old brain. We do still have the talking heads, and we also learn that Spawn has another drawback or another curse that's upon him. Not only has his memories been taken, not only does he look like ground hamburger, even if he uses his powers to alter his appearance, which he does have the capability to do, he can only make himself look like a Caucasian man. And he knows he used to be a black man. And it's just one more thing that happens to Al Simmons that makes him think or sort of feeds into that idea that he has, that sense that he has that he's being played with. Again, it might be a little tropey, deal with the devil, but it's also real classic. I mean, the idea of a Faustian deal goes back centuries. So you can't say that McFarlane is leaning too far into tropes. It's more of a classic storytelling technique or thread, if you will. Tons of people have done it. We get some more scenes of Sam and Twitch. We get
I just want to, if I can, Chase, I just want to make a comment that I think that I wonder how well that would play today if a black man comes back as a white person with today's toxic political climate in comic books. I wonder how this scene would play out in today, because the way
white face,
yeah,
it would be, right?
They call it whitewashing, or I don't know, but it would,
yeah.
I open question, I guess.
That's a good question. I sort of think it would almost be worse in a way, because I feel like we're more aware, we're more sensitive to the crap that persons of color have to put up with. This would be one more thing. I have a hard time thinking it would be received negatively. Maybe it might be seen as in poor taste, but I sort of think it was felt a little bit that way back then. But at the same time, in '92, comics, mainstream media wasn't paying attention. So, the bigger question, or the more interesting question, might be if comics were at the center of pop culture in 1992 the way they are now, how would this have played? And then obviously with the as politics and society has shifted to the left, I feel like, or more progressive these days. It's it's an interesting thought for sure.
I'm curious, Jake, your thoughts. How important do you think it was that that Spawn, that Al Simmons be a black man, or did it matter?
It's definitely surprising. And this scene where he tries to at least make him look human. The fact that he just can't even go back and make his skin the same color as it used to be. It feels like it really does feel like he's lost a lot of his identity, and to a degree, even a lot more of his humanity.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Compared to similar concepts like the Netflix adaptation of Altered Carbon, this isn't just it's this isn't a form that he has to make by choice or even has the opportunity to go back to it at any time he wants. Al Simmons is generally locked away from his identity in several ways, and he can't get it back in ways he just doesn't understand.
Yeah, I find it kind of I chuckle a little bit at just how pissed off Al Simmons is that he comes back as a white guy. Like he's it's like, why did I have to come back white? He's actually pissed off. It's like, why did I have to be white? And almost it's like, and the poor guy, he wants he's I think he looks like a good looking white guy. I think, at least he's got the typical 90s look, sort of almost like a blonde beach bum with long blonde hair, but he looks like a typical beach guy, all white. And, Wanda, ultimately later on when he finally meets his wife as this white guy, it's interesting how I never really picked up a lot of issues of race in these issues, and in fact I think that's one of the reasons why I think this issue reads so well, is that I read this and I don't get a sense that there's politics in it. This is just good. This is good character work. This is good story. Politics isn't in it. You can go back and read it and still enjoy it. But if you really want to read some politics in it, I suppose you can, but it's not in your face. It's not shoved down your throat. And I think that's why, I think that's what a lot of people refer to the people who are overly sensitive about politics and comics. And I just think that's interesting because he gets away with it here. He deals with Todd McFarlan. He deals with the news. He deals with the broadcasting. He deals with government issues, corrupt governments, conspiracies, military coups, all that jazz. And then he throws in the main character coming back as a white man who, I mean, it just goes to show you that if you tell the story right, I mean, people aren't going to notice, but it's interesting. It's like I said, I'm seeing this through the lens of a modern day lens in the 2021. I have a different appreciation for this issue.
Yeah, it works on a lot of levels that we didn't read into then because maybe the world was a different place. And in terms of him being a white guy, not being able to change his, it's one thing if he was able to make himself look like what he used to look like, right? That's obviously where he would want to get. But if he can't get there, at least just make me look like an African American guy, right? He can't even get to that point. But the way this plays out in the story, it's just one more obstacle. It's just one more crappy thing that whoever, again, we don't know the name yet, haven't been introduced to him yet. It's just one more thing that this devil that he made the deal with has done to him. It's just one more piece of trauma, just one more bad thing that's happened to him. And so you don't necessarily, focus on that. But yeah, it is interesting because as much as we say, things are a little more political now, we're a little more sensitive, a little more aware. I mean, McFarlane is doing it here. Rocky, you said yourself with these talking heads, the 44 viewers voice guy is, I know he gets in it. We eventually find out what his name is. I can't remember what it is at the moment, but he very much is much more of the voice of the right or the conservative movement. The E! Entertainment television reporters more about sort of the vapid culture, certainly coming out of the 80s in terms of entertainment and celebrity and that sort of thing. And then CNN is supposed to be, at least in my mind, a little bit more of the left, but supposed supposedly just stating the facts, but at the same time a little bit more of a voice of the government, voice of the man, as it were. So there's all that playing out in the talking head vignettes. But more than anything, what I feel about in this issue is it's just us learning all the crap that Al Simmons has got himself in. Like he's gotten himself a raw deal, and from everything we get in context, he was a very heroic guy. You know, we learn about his relationship with Jason Wynn, who was, you know, in charge of this sort of this intelligence agency. It was supposedly above FBI and NSA and CIA, was sort of the pinnacle black bag kind of place that Al Simmons worked for, and how maybe Wynn took things a little too far, and maybe, you know, some first hints at that, maybe how Al Simmons died. And then, yeah, the whole gritty crime noir feel with this Violator character going around and ripping people's hearts out. And then, and at this point, we don't even know until the very last page that this clown who meets Spawn for the first time, and Spawn doesn't really want to hear anything about him. He doesn't see him as a threat. He's like, God, dude, you're just a weird little guy. You know, leave me alone. And in that last page, it's revealed as the little clown guy, Violator, turns into the monstrous demon that we saw ripping mafia guys' hearts out throughout the issue. So that, I remember that being a surprise, and the blurb there, Spawn versus the true Violator, coming up next. So if there was anything I remember about the issues back then, despite the fact that McFarlane's a pretty wordy writer, I remember reading these really quick and thinking that the pacing and the value maybe wasn't there, because you got to remember when these books came out, they were $2. They were $1.95, which was, at most comics at the time, were $1. But you didn't have ads, and the color and the paper were nicer, you know, and it makes sense. Most of the image guys were artists, and they want to present their work in the best light. And I was happy to pay it at the time, but I do remember thinking, man, it goes so fast. And a lot of that has to do with the size of the panels and the detail in the art. You want larger panels. But what's funny now is it's like modern comics, you know, over the last 20 years, they caught up with detail and also prices, and paper stock and all that kind of thing. They caught up to this level of detail and this size of panels, and then have surpassed it, right? So when we go back and read these, it doesn't take 30 minutes to read these like it does some Bronze Age comics when you go back and read those. Like, go back and read an old issue of Rom Space Knight, or early issues of the Chris Claremont issue of X-Men. You want to talk about a lot of dialogue, and it's a meaty read. It'll take you 20, 30 minutes to read it. But these comics from 92, they do take a little longer to read than modern books. But I remember at the time, you know, this didn't take 20, 30 minutes like a lot of the other books at the time. So again, interesting perspective going back and reading these nowadays as opposed to back then. So Jake, any thoughts about the Violator as a character, as an early nemesis for Spawn?
A bit more nuance to him than I thought. Like he's supposed to, like, in his mind, he's a mentor who feels like he needs to discipline his charge a bit more to serve his and his boss's interests. But yeah, plus it might even be a slight Joker Batman like dynamic, since Violator is one character who will never leave Al Simmons alone in his life. Yeah, he's practically like a cancer that Al just can't get rid of. And
I actually have a question about Violator, and because I only read the first 12 issues of Spawn, so I'm only 278 issues behind, or plus, or whatever it is. But what is the Violator exactly? Is he like the opposite of a guardian angel? He's like the guardian devil, or is that what he kind of is? Is that what he's supposed to be?
If anything, he's just the devil Al Simmons made it. He's essentially just an underling of the devil Al Simmons made the deal with. Just somebody to keep an eye on things, because Malbolgia, as we come to learn his name, is too busy trying to make other Hellspawn like Al.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, Violator's not so different from Spawn. In terms of Malbolgia took a human who was willing to sell his soul and imbued him with some of his power and said, "You're immortal. You get to go do whatever it is that you want to do." But he starts out as a human. Violator starts out as this demon who's just like an inhabitant of hell, and he infuses him with that power. So in terms of him looking like this sort of fat slobby clown, that's basically the equivalent of Spawn changing his appearance to look like a white surfer guy. But this guy gets to choose to make himself look like a fat slobby clown with way too many teeth. So yeah, but we'll get into that with subsequent issues. So yeah, I mean, the story's moving along. I am a little surprised, and again, I go back to the difference between modern storytelling and the storytelling back then when things weren't as decompressed. This is only the second issue, and we've already sort of been introduced to somebody who hangs around and is sort of an antagonist for Spawn for many issues, at least for several years. Again, nowadays I don't think it happens that quick, and the reveal that this creepy looking clown is also this demon creature that's ripping hearts out of people. Again, I don't think it happens as fast. So I wonder how much of the reason we're enjoying this, Rocky, is because it's just not necessarily details of the story itself, but in sense of story structure, it harkens
works
back to a different time that we really enjoyed.
Yeah. Well, the pacing is good. It doesn't insult the reader. I don't need to be spoon fed. I think the tendency for modern day storytellers is that they tend to be too decompressed. They have a tendency of drawing every scene of every walk and footstep down an alley, which is not necessary. They try to establish every single bit and iota and nuance of mood and tone. So you don't need to do that. I mean, and then I go back to the referencing issue 1 where there's 9 panel grids there that McFarlane used masterfully by giving us snapshots of Al Simmons' life. We didn't need all, that's all we needed to establish the mystery. We didn't need more than that. And in fact, you that's the whole point of a mystery, is that you only get snapshots and you get some misdirection, and there is some misdirection here, and there are mysteries that play out, and at the same time, this story has moved forward. You learn a lot in 2 issues, and I got to give a shout out, surprise, to the amazing art. I remember Violator. I mean, the Violator puts the Joker smile to shame. Back then, this guy could out joke the Joker, the Violator. This guy he's smiley. Look at those teeth. This guy is a character, and well, is it any wonder that Todd McFarlane's action figures didn't sell like hotcakes once he designed them? And I actually have it in a box over there. I actually have the full scale Angela, original full scale 19-inch Angela action figure, and the full scale Spawn. I got both of them. I got them back in the day, and actually, I think I could probably get $50 or $60 for each of them if I put them on eBay. But at some point, maybe I'll display them if I join you for another day of Spawnmas. We'll see.
Yeah, I remember the only toy I could ever find was Violator. Nobody wanted the big giant Violator when it was always. But even now, I think that's one of the more expensive ones because nobody bought it. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
So. Anyway, Jake, any last thoughts on issue 2 as we're finishing up here?
The more I look at it, the more I feel like that these early issues of Spawn are one of the same story beats as one I might find in manga. That's a bit of a praise, really. Like, good pace rather than just trying to and each incrementally adding to the story a bit. And characters that complement one another, all that other stuff. And and something that just compounds without adding too much to it all at once.
Yeah, you're right. That's a very manga-esque way of telling the story. And I can't remember anybody ever asking McFarlane about any manga influences on Spawn. So I don't know. Maybe if we ever have him on the show again, I'll have to ask him that question. So, any last thoughts, Rocky, as we're winding down here?
Uh, Not really. I'm just surprised at how much I'm in. Am enjoying this trip down memory lane, and uh, to read Spawn over Christmas of all holidays, I would have thought maybe Halloween would be more appropriate, but strangely it feels appropriate. I have my nice Christmas scarf on. I'm got a tie. I got my fedora on. I'm sipping Crown Vanilla. I mean, life is good, my friend, and Merry Christmas to the two of you.
Yeah, you're looking dapper. I'll say Merry Spawnmas to you and to all our listeners. The only thing that I did briefly consider that we could have started a month earlier and done it for Thanksgiving, and it would have been Spawnsgiving, which I think has a nice ring to it as well. But
Yeah.
anyway, listeners, be sure you tune in tomorrow for issue number 3 of Spawnmas, episode number 3. We'll also have some other episodes coming up as well throughout the entirety of 12 days of the comic source. And we should have some giveaways coming up for you all as well. So stay tuned for that. Don't forget, if you're checking us out only on the YouTube channel, be sure you subscribe to the Comic Source on your favorite podcast platform or app. Just do a search for the Comic Source, whether it's Spotify or Google Play or iTunes or whatever, or your favorite app on your phone, Pod Addict or Podster or whatever. We're on all of them, so you don't want to miss out on any of the audio content. So be sure and do a search for us. Conversely, if you have only been listening to us on audio and you want to see our smiling faces and check out the art as we talk about it, be sure you go over to YouTube, do a search for Comic Space Boom ! That's Rocky's channel. Subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the 12 days of the Comic Source collaborations between Comic Boom and Comic Source. And also, you want to be sure to check out all of Rocky's other content, our DC spotlights that come out, all the deep dives he does into other books that he's read. And once in a while, he even shows off some of his amazing comic collection. So be sure to subscribe, ring that notification bell, and like this video. Once again, we give thanks to our host, our co-guest host, Jake, for joining us. Don't forget, you can check out the show notes for his article about Spawn. He has a lot of good points. It's a relatively quick read. It's not some long, analytical, scientific article. It's going to take you a long time to read, but it's definitely worth your time if you're a Spawn fan for a long time, or if you're just joining and learning about Spawn while we're doing 12 Days of Spawnmas. It's definitely worth a read. So we really want to thank everybody for your support as always, and we will talk to you next time.